Hi guys, tonight we're slipping back into a world before cups, before barns, before breakfast tables, when milk is not yet comfort, not yet commerce, not yet that suspicious carton hiding at the back of the fridge. It is warm, secret, alive, guarded by mothers with horns, hooves, teeth, and absolutely no interest in becoming part of your evening routine. You stand beneath a wide prehistoric sky, where grass bends in a cold wind and wild cattle move like dark shadows across the plain. Somewhere nearby, a child cries, a fire spits, and someone wonders whether the liquid meant for a calf might also keep a human alive. Strange thought, risky thought. Civilization, as usual, begins with someone doing something that looks unwise. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and while you get comfortable, comment where you are listening from and your local time. Maybe midnight in Manila, dusk in Dublin, or 3 a.m. in Toronto. Bravely pretending this is just one more video. Now, dim the lights, and let yourself stand at the edge of a very old camp. Long before anyone writes down a recipe, a law, or a grocery list. The ground beneath your bare feet is cool and uneven. Dry grass brushes your ankles. Smoke drifts low from a small fire, carrying the smell of charred wood, animal fat, damp hide, and crushed leaves. Around you, people move quietly because noise is expensive here. Noise can bring predators. Noise can scatter prey. Noise can wake a baby who has finally mercifully stopped screaming. In this world, milk belongs first to the young of other animals. That is obvious to everyone watching a calf press its nose beneath its mother and drink. Wild cattle, especially the great aurochs, are enormous creatures, far larger than most modern domestic cattle. Their horns curve outward like polished weapons. Their shoulders rise high and powerful. They are not gentle meadow decorations. They are living walls of muscle with opinions. Very strong opinions. If you approach too closely, you may discover one of those opinions at speed. Yet humans are observant. You watch everything because watching is how you survive. You see that calves grow on milk before they can graze properly. You see that newborn goats, sheep, and wild cattle can turn a mother's body into food without killing her. That last part matters. Hunters know meat well. Meat fills the belly, warms the blood, and feeds the group. But meat ends when the animal dies. Milk, if somehow taken again and again, is different. It is food that returns, not forever, not magically, but often enough to make a hungry mind pause. Before herding begins, humans do not simply wake up one morning and decide to become dairy farmers. History is rarely that tidy, which is very rude of it. Instead, there are long ages of trial, mistake, hunger, courage, and possibly some regrettable stomach trouble. The first people who drank animal milk as adults may have found it difficult to digest. Most mammals lose much of their ability to digest lactose after infancy. Many early humans probably did too. A mouthful of fresh milk might taste rich, warm, faintly sweet, and grassy. But the belly could respond later with dramatic commentary. Not the kind of commentary anyone asks for around a fire. Still, hunger has a persuasive voice. Imagine a dry season. The rivers shrink, berries disappear, herds move unpredictably. A mother in your group struggles to feed her child. A wounded hunter cannot chew tough meat. An elder grows thin beside the fire. You notice a captured young animal bleating for its mother, and you notice the swollen udder of a female kept close by, perhaps because she's been trapped, injured, or taken during a hunt. Someone tries, maybe carefully, maybe desperately, maybe with the confidence of a person who has not fully considered the consequences. The animal kicks. People laugh nervously. The first milking attempt is probably not elegant. There is no charming wooden stool, no polished pail, no peaceful sunrise. There is mud, fear, warm breath, and a very offended creature. The mainstream historical fact is that dairying became possible only after some animals were domesticated, especially sheep, goats, and cattle, beginning in parts of Southwest Asia roughly 10 or 11,000 years ago. But the desire to understand animal milk likely began earlier, in the long watching years. Before barns, there are hunters studying mothers and young. Before butter, there is curiosity. Before cheese, there is the smell of milk turning sour in the heat, and someone noticing that sour does not always mean useless. You crouch near the fire and feel the warmth on your shins while the night air cools your back. Around the camp, hides are stretched, bones are cracked for marrow, and stone tools are set beside sleeping bodies. Milk, in this deep past, is not yet a daily drink. It is more like a possibility. A strange white exception in a world where food usually comes from digging, gathering, trapping, or killing. It is soft food in a hard age. There is another thing you notice. Mothers matter. Animal mothers, human mothers, all mothers. Milk ties life to bodies in a way no one can ignore. You see infants survive because someone feeds them. You see orphaned young animals weaken without milk. You see the powerful closeness between nursing and protection. This gives milk an emotional weight long before it becomes an economic one. It is not only nourishment, it is dependence, it is care, it is vulnerability, it is also, inconveniently, guarded by horns. A quirky tidbit waits here in the shadows. Some researchers have suggested that early humans may have learned useful things about fermented milk by watching natural spoilage, or even by noticing milk curdle inside the stomachs of young animals. It sounds mildly horrifying in that special prehistoric way, but it is practical. The stomach of a milk-fed calf contains enzymes that curdle milk. Later, people would use animal stomachs in cheese-making. Nobody in your ancient camp calls this food science. Of course. They call it something closer to that weird thing happened, and nobody died. A classic foundation of cuisine. Historians still argue whether the earliest interest in milk began mainly from hunger, ritual curiosity, care for young animals, or the practical habits of keeping captured females alive near human camps. The evidence is faint because milk leaves little behind. Bones remain, stone tools remain. Pottery shards can later preserve traces of fats, but a hand reaching toward an udder in the dusk leaves no neat footprint in the soil. The past keeps that moment private, so you listen for clues instead. The low grunt of wild cattle beyond the grass, the thin bleat of a goat-like animal tethered badly to a branch, the snap of burning twigs, the wet breathing of people asleep under skins. The atmosphere is tense but intimate, a world both enormous and close. You smell earth after cold rain. You touch a hide stiff with drying fat. You taste smoke on your tongue. Everything here must be earned. The great shift is not simply that humans begin to drink milk. It is that humans begin to think differently about animals. A wild herd is a moving feast, but a managed herd is a future. That idea is quiet at first. It begins with watching migration routes, then perhaps protecting a few young animals, then returning to the same valleys, then tolerating certain animals near camp, then selecting the calmer ones, the slower ones, the ones less determined to turn your ribs into a percussion instrument. Little by little, the relationship changes. Animals become not only prey, but property, companions, danger, wealth, and storage. Storage is important. In a world without refrigerators, grain silos, or polite little labels saying best before, animals store food inside themselves. They turn grass humans cannot eat into meat, blood, hide, bone, dung, and eventually milk. Grass is everywhere in many landscapes, but your teeth and stomach are not made to live on it. A ruminant animal can do what you cannot. It takes the ordinary green world and quietly converts it into nourishment. This is one of history's great bargains. Though the animals may not describe it so warmly, you follow a small group across a landscape at dawn. Mist hangs in shallow hollows. Your shoulders ache from carrying a bundle of tools and dried meat. The air smells of wet stone and crushed grass. Ahead, hoofprints mark the mud near a stream. Someone kneels and touches them. The group knows these marks. They know which animals passed, how recently, and in what direction. Survival depends on reading the world like a book long before there are books. At the stream, you see the herd in the distance. Large bodies shift through pale light. Calves stay close to their mothers. Birds lift suddenly from the grass. No one rushes. You wait. Waiting is one of the oldest human skills, though rarely praised because it does not look impressive on a monument. You watch the young feed. You watch the females stand. You begin to understand cycles, birth, nursing, weaning, return to fertility, migration, scarcity, abundance. Milk is part of time. It appears when life renews itself. Human bodies change with these choices too, but slowly, much later. Some populations develop lactase persistence, the ability for many adults to digest lactose more easily. That genetic change becomes strongly associated with long traditions of dairying in parts of Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia. But in the earlier stage, before the first herds are fully human-managed, milk is not yet the universal glass of childhood posters and kitchen counters. It is uncertain, seasonal, bodily, and strange. You can almost feel the hesitation. Fresh milk is warm against the hand. It foams slightly if collected into a skin or hollowed vessel. It smells animal, grassy, fatty, alive. It is nothing like the chilled, standardized drink of modern life. There are hairs in it, maybe ash, maybe a floating speck you choose not to examine too closely, because morale is also a survival resource. Someone drinks, others watch. A face tightens, then relaxes. Maybe the taste is good. Maybe the belly later rebels. Maybe they learn to sip small amounts, or to let it sour, or to feed it to children first. Soured milk may have been easier for some people to tolerate because fermentation reduces lactose. That matters. The first useful dairy foods may not have been tall cups of fresh milk, but thick, tangy, semi-fermented mixtures eaten quickly before they spoiled further. Imagine the texture on your tongue soft, clinging sharp at the edges, smelling of hide bags and warm stone. Not exactly luxury hotel breakfast. No, but in a hungry season it might feel like mercy. You settle beside the fire as evening returns. The camp is quieter now. A child sleeps against someone's lap. A tether creaks. Somewhere in the darkness, a large animal exhales through its nose. The sound is heavy and uncertain, like a door that may or may not open. You understand that milk begins not with comfort, but with negotiation, between hunger and danger, between humans and animals, between the body's limits and the imagination's stubbornness, before cities rise, before temples pour milk as offering, before merchants sell butter by weight, before schoolchildren are told it builds strong bones. There is this simple, risky awareness life can be borrowed without taking the whole animal. A mother's milk, meant for another species young, becomes a question humans keep asking. Can this feed us? Can this be saved? Can this animal stay? Can tomorrow be made a little less frightening? The night deepens. Stars spread above you with impossible brightness. No calendar names the year. No scribe records the experiment. The fire lowers into red eyes. You pull a hide closer around your shoulders and feel its rough edge against your skin. Nearby, in the dark, a calf stirs and presses close to its mother. The old world breathes. Milk waits inside it. Not yet civilization, but already a promise. You wake with the village, not to an alarm, thankfully, but to a muddle of softer, older noises. A goat coughs somewhere near the wall of a house. A child whines under a wool blanket. Someone is grinding grain with the patient scrape of stone against stone, a rhythm so steady it seems to belong to the earth itself. Smoke hangs low in the morning air. It smells of dung fuel, damp straw, old ash, warm bodies, and the sour edge of yesterday's milk. You step into a settlement of mud, brick, and packed clay, where life has stopped wandering quite so much and has begun the strange experiment of staying put. The houses crouch close together, their walls thick against heat and cold. Roofs are flat, ladders lean at angles, and storage baskets sit beneath woven covers. The floor feels cool and smooth under your soles, polished by generations of bare feet. Outside, animals shift in small pens, their hooves pressing soft marks into trampled earth. Here, milk is no longer merely a question, but it is a task. Not an easy task, of course. History rarely hands out useful things without making you bend your back first. You squat beside a goat while another person steadies her head and murmurs in a tone that is half comfort, half negotiation. The goat's ribs move beneath your hand. Her coat is coarse, warm, and faintly dusty. You hear the tiny stream strike the inside of a clay vessel, a quick bright tapping, then a softer splashing as the liquid gathers. It is intimate work, a little awkward, and very easy to ruin if the animal decides your morning should become more athletic. In these early farming villages, sheep and goats are often the practical stars of the dairy world. They are smaller than cattle, easier to herd, quicker to reproduce, and less likely to rearrange your entire skeleton with one annoyed swing of the head. Cattle matter too, but they require more space, more fodder, and more nerve. A cow is wealth with hooves. A goat is trouble with milk attached. Naturally, humans make room for both. A mainstream historical fact sits quietly in the mud brick around you by roughly the Neolithic period. Communities in Southwest Asia were managing sheep, goats, and cattle, and archaeological traces from ancient pottery show that people processed dairy fats thousands of years ago. The evidence does not look dramatic. No golden milk cup engraved with first breakfast appears from the soil. Instead, old pots preserve microscopic chemical memories. Grease seeps into clay, survives time, and whispers that milk was handled, heated, strained, and transformed. You carry a vessel toward the shade. It is not perfectly shaped. One side bulges. The rim is uneven. A fingerprint remains hardened near the base, left by someone whose name is gone, but whose thumb pressed too firmly into wet clay. Inside is fresh milk, still warm from the animal. You smell grass, hide, and a soft sweetness beneath the barnyard heaviness. Around the doorway, flies gather with the confidence of tiny landlords. Someone waves them away with a bundle of reeds, and they return immediately, because flies have never respected human boundaries. The village depends on timing. Animals must be led out to graze when the light is gentle. Kids and lambs must drink enough to live, but not so much that humans get nothing. Grain must be stored away from damp. Water must be hauled. Pens must be cleaned, and let us be honest, cleaned in this world means made slightly less fragrant. The smell of manure is everywhere, but it is not only waste. Dried dung becomes fuel, mixed into plaster. It strengthens surfaces. Spread on fields, it feeds soil. The village is a circle of uses, some elegant, some not suitable for polite dinner conversation. Milk fits this circle beautifully. Animals eat grasses, scrub, leaves, and stalks that humans cannot digest well. Their bodies turn rough plants into something soft and rich. This changes the meaning of land. A rocky hillside that cannot grow much grain may still feed goats. A patch of stubble after harvest may still feed sheep. A field's leftovers become flesh, wool, manure, and milk. You begin to understand why a herd is not just a herd. It is a walking pantry. a savings account, a dowry, a debt payment, a social headache, and occasionally a very loud alarm system. The work of milking also changes the shape of the day. At dawn, hands are busy. At dusk, hands are busy again. You learn the animals by personality. One ewe stands quietly if scratched behind the ear. Another waits until the vessel is nearly full, then lifts her hoof with theatrical precision. A young goat chews through a tie, escapes, and climbs onto a roof as if she has discovered architecture's true purpose. People shout, children laugh. The goat looks down with the blank dignity of an elected official. A quirky tidbit from early dairying is that some of the first technology around milk may have been less about drinking it fresh, and more about letting it become something safer. Strainers, skins, baskets, and heated pots could help separate curds from whey. That means an early dairy worker might be less like a cheerful milkman and more like a cautious experimenter, sniffing a pot and deciding whether it is food, medicine, or a mistake with texture. The line between invention and accident is very thin when your laboratory is a smoky room with goats outside. You sit near a hearth and watch milk warm slowly. The fire clicks. A clay pot blackens at the base. Steam rises and carries a creamy smell into the room, mixing with smoke and the sharp tang of fermenting mash. The air is close, but calming. Shadows move softly along the walls. Someone stirs with a wooden stick worn smooth by use. Heat helps. Souring helps. Turning milk into curds helps it last longer and may make it gentler on stomachs that struggle with fresh lactose. In a place where food can vanish through drought, rot, theft, or one ambitious rodent, anything that lasts another day earns respect. Children gather close because milk belongs strongly to childhood in these villages. A small cup may be passed to a toddler who has recently stopped nursing. An elder with worn teeth may eat soft curds. A sick person may be given a warm mixture when chewing grain is difficult. You feel the tenderness in these gestures. Dairy is labour, yes, but it is also care measured in small portions. Nobody wastes it. A spill draws a sharp intake of breath. A cracked pot is mourned more sincerely than some relatives. Historians still argue whether early villagers valued milk mainly for everyday calories, for feeding children after weaning, for surviving bad harvests, or for the social power of owning productive animals. The answer may shift from valley to valley, household to household. In one place, milk might be a seasonal bonus. In another, it might steady the entire food supply. In another, it might mark status, because the household with more animals can lend, trade, feast, and influence decisions without ever standing on a podium, which is helpful since podiums are in short supply. You walk past storage bins where grain is sealed under plaster. Nearby, a woman pats fresh clay around a wall crack. A man twists fibre into rope. Children collect dry dung cakes and stack them like serious little accountants of fuel. The village is not peaceful in a simple way. There is always hunger nearby, always disease, always disagreement over water, animals, fields, and who fail to latch the pen properly. Yet there is also security of a new kind. The same paths are trodden each morning. The same animals return each night. Memory settles into place. Owning milk animals also pulls people into relationships with one another. Herders need help during births. Families exchange breeding animals. Milk can be shared with neighbours, offered to guests, or held back when trust runs thin. A good milker becomes valuable. A healthy female animal becomes a source of bargaining power. Marriage agreements, inheritance, seasonal feasts, and household rank all begin to lean on the herd. You can almost hear civilization forming in the bleats, arguments, and splashing pails. The animals shape the bodies of the villagers too. Arms grow strong from carrying fodder and water. Fingers learn pressure and patience. Backs bend. Knees ache. Clothing smells faintly of lanolin, smoke, and sour milk no matter how many times it is aired. Wool catches burrs. Hands crack in cold weather. A successful dairy life is not a clean white apron floating through sunshine. It is sore wrists, watchful eyes, and the ability to notice when one animal's udder feels too hot, too tight, or not quite right. As the sun climbs, the herd moves outward. Dust rises around their legs. Bells may not yet jingle in the charming way later storytellers enjoy, but the soundscape is full enough hooves clicking on stone, throats bleating, dogs barking, people calling names that vanish into the hills. You follow along a path edged with thorn and wild herbs. Brush scratches your calf. The air warms. A goat noses your hand, hoping you are secretly edible. At midday, the settlement shimmers in heat. Milk from morning has already begun its transformation. Some is consumed quickly, some is set aside to thicken, some may be mixed with grain into a soft meal. Nothing is simple, but everything is connected. The clay pot, the grazing slope, the child's cup, the dung fire, the household's pride, the village's survival, all of it gathers around this pale liquid drawn by hand from animals living close enough to be known, feared, cursed, and loved. By evening, you return with dust on your skin and the smell of animals in your hair. The low sun turns the walls honey-coloured. Inside the pen, kids butt their mothers impatiently. People settle again into the milking rhythm. Fingers press. Milk strikes clay. Smoke rises. Someone laughs when the roof goat attempts another political statement from above. You hold the warm vessel carefully with both hands. It is heavier than it looks. In its weight you feel the new world of the village less wandering, more obligation, less uncertainty in some ways, more in others, more food, more work, more possessions, more reasons to argue, more reasons to stay. Milk has entered the household, and with it comes a daily promise. Not grand, not easy, not spotless, just warm, useful, and waiting in the hands of people learning how to live beside the animals that feed them. You enter the city through a gate that smells of dust, river mud, sweat, and baking grain. The walls rise above you in sun-baked brick, thick and warm to the touch, their surfaces rough with straw and old handprints. Donkeys complain in the street with the weary confidence of creatures who know civilization depends on them and yet gives them very little applause. Wheels creak. Sandaled feet slap packed earth. Somewhere, behind a courtyard wall, milk is being poured into a jar. The city is louder than the village and much less patient. It has schedules, officials, storage rooms, temple servants, merchants, scribes, and people who seem to exist mainly to stand in doorways and judge everyone's basket technique. You move through a street in ancient Mesopotamia, where canals carry water through a hot, flat landscape and fields of barley shimmer beyond the settlement. Date palms lean in the light, clay tablets dry on shelves, reed mats shade market stalls. The air tastes faintly of salt, smoke, and animal breath. Milk has changed here. It is still drawn by hand, still warm from the animal, still fragile in heat, but now it enters a world of records, rations, offerings, and trade. A household may keep goats or cattle, but larger institutions matter too. Temples and palaces can own herds, employ workers, collect produce, and distribute food. In a city, milk does not simply feed the family. It moves through systems. That sounds very grand, until you remember that the system probably includes flies, leaky jars, and at least one exhausted clerk trying to count goats while they refuse to stand still. A mainstream historical fact rests in those clay tablets and carved images in Mesopotamia. Dairy products such as milk, butter, and cheese were important enough to appear in administrative records, food lists, and religious contexts. Ancient people did not just stumble through dairy life casually. They measured it, stored it, assigned it, and gave it meaning. You can picture a scribe pressing a reed stylus into wet clay, noting quantities of butter or cheese for workers, offerings, or temple use. The tablet is small in the hand, cool at first, then warming against the skin. Each mark is a tiny act of control over something that spoils if ignored. You follow a porter carrying a sealed jar toward a storage room. The jar brushes against his hip, its clay surface is gritty, and a smear of dried cream clings near the lid. Inside, the milk may already be changing, thickening in the heat. Fresh milk is difficult to keep in a city where summer presses down like a heavy blanket, so people turn it into more stable foods. Butter can be clarified, cheese can be salted, fermented milk can be eaten sooner, shared quickly, or sent where plain milk would fail. Cities love food that can be counted and stored. Milk, being dramatic and perishable, must be persuaded into useful forms. In the marketplace you hear vendors calling over one another. A woman offers curds from a shallow bowl. A man sells dates piled like small amber stones. Fish from the river glisten under a damp cloth. The smell is intense brine. Milk, smoke, onions, wool, and the hot mineral breath of streets under sun. You taste a spoonful of thickened dairy mixed with grain, and it is tart, cooling, and slightly grainy. It coats your tongue. For a worker who has spent the morning hauling bricks, that sour softness might be relief. For someone wealthy, it might be only one item among many. In a city, the same food can be survival for one person and a side dish for another. Civilization apparently invents inequality quite efficiently. Very clever, very rude. You pass toward a temple precinct where the atmosphere shifts. The streets widen, the noise softens into ritual movement. Priests, servants, brewers, bakers, and herders pass through shaded courtyards. Animals are not merely economic units here. They belong to divine households, sacred estates, and ceremonial cycles. Milk and butter can appear as offerings, not because gods need calories in the human sense, but because precious foods express care, honor, and order. To give milk is to give freshness, fertility, and the labor of many hands. A bowl placed in a sacred space carries the pasture, the milker, the potter, the herder, the clerk, and the animal's body into one gesture. The sound in the courtyard is low and layered. A jar lid scrapes, a broom whispers across dust. Someone chants in a language old even to later memory. You feel heat radiating from a wall, while shade cools the side of your face. Milk poured into a vessel makes a soft, intimate sound, almost too domestic for such a formal place. That is part of its power. It bridges the household and the sacred. It belongs to mothers, workers, children, animals, and gods. Not bad for a liquid that still goes bad if left unattended too long. Now the river changes and you find yourself along the Nile, where black soil lies rich beside shining water. Egypt carries milk into a different light. Cows appear in art and religious imagination. Goddesses such as Hathor are linked with motherhood, fertility, music, joy, and bovine forms. You see cattle painted on tomb walls with careful attention to horns, hides, and movement. You smell lotus, mud, reeds, dung fires, and the dry linen scent of sun-warmed cloth. A herdsman's hand rests on the flank of a cow, feeling the living heat beneath the hide. Nearby, a calf nudges forward, impatient for its share. Milk in Egypt is both ordinary and symbolic. It feeds bodies, but it also gathers meanings around birth, renewal, and divine nurture. You might see a mother feeding a child in a shaded room while outside. Priests handle offerings in spaces thick with incense. The association is not difficult to understand. Milk appears when life continues. It is produced by bodies capable of sustaining young. It arrives white and bright in a world where colour carries meaning. The symbolism almost writes itself, though ancient scribes would prefer to write it properly, with beautiful signs and official approval. A quirky tidbit from ancient dairy culture is that some Mesopotamian scenes show dairy processing in such detail that modern viewers have tried to identify different stages, from milking to straining to making butter or cheese. There is even a famous carved relief often nicknamed the dairy frieze, showing people handling cattle and dairy vessels. It feels unexpectedly practical, like discovering that someone carved a sacred monument and also gave it the energy of a kitchen tutorial. Ancient art can be majestic, yes, but sometimes it also says, here is how we deal with milk without making a complete mess. You move eastward in imagination to the Indus world, where cities such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa are laid out with careful streets, baked brick structures, wells, drains, and an urban order that still feels quietly impressive. The atmosphere is different again. The air is warm and dusty. Water splashes from a well. Bangles click softly on a wrist. A clay vessel cools in shade. Cattle are visible in seals and figurines, and humped zebu cattle seem to matter in the region's animal life. Direct written explanations are missing because the Indus script remains undeciphered, which is, frankly, inconsiderate of the past. It leaves you standing among excellent drains and mysterious signs, wanting someone to label the dairy cupboard. Historians still argue whether milk held the same ritual importance in Indus cities as it did in later South Asian traditions, or whether its main role was practical, household-based, and only partly visible through animal remains and residues. The uncertainty matters. It reminds you not to pour later meanings too heavily into earlier cups. Milk may have been important, but the exact shape of that importance is hidden behind silent seals, broken pots, and bones sorted by patient archaeologists. In all these cities, milk meets population. That is the real transformation. More people live close together. More food must arrive reliably. More animals must be managed at the edges of streets, fields, marshes, and grazing lands. A city cannot survive on elegance. It needs calories. It needs fats. It needs workers fed before they move stones, dig canals, harvest grain, carry water, bake bread, brew beer, and repair walls that never stop needing repair because walls, like governments, are always asking for maintenance. You stand beside labourers receiving rations. The air's full of dust and human warmth. Baskets are passed from hand to hand. Bread, beer, onions, dates, and dairy may all belong somewhere in this food economy, depending on place and status. A lump of cheese is dense in the palm, slightly oily at the surface, sharp in smell. It can travel better than fresh milk. It can be portioned. It can be owed, paid, taxed, or offered. Milk has become something bureaucracy can understand, once it stops being liquid for long enough. Yet for all the records and rituals, the most basic moment remains quiet. You step into a courtyard near sunset. A cow shifts her weight. A woman leans in, forehead almost touching the animal's side. Her hands move with practiced pressure. Milk strikes the vessel in quick pulses. The city roars beyond the wall, but here the sound is small and steady. A child waits with a cup. A dog watches hopefully, pretending innocence with professional skill. The evening air smells of warm clay, straw, and the first coolness rising from the ground. In cities, milk becomes part of civilization's great bargain. It helps feed workers, honors gods, enriches meals, and records wealth. It enters accounts, rituals, art, and urban appetite. It also remains stubbornly physical. An animal must give it, a person must collect it, a vessel must hold it, and time must not be allowed to ruin it. You feel that tension in your hands as you lift the jar. The clay is heavy, the contents shift softly around you. The city continues its restless breathing, and within that breath, milk has found a place among bricks, gods, markets, and human hunger. You sit in the shade of a low shelter while milk trembles in a shallow bowl, and for once, Nobody is trying to drink it quickly. That alone feels like a small rebellion against time. Fresh milk is impatient. It warms, sours, separates, thickens, and changes its mind with astonishing speed. Leave it alone in a hot room and it begins composing its own future, usually without asking permission. Yet here, human hands are learning to guide that change, to coax it away from waste and toward food. The air is rich with scent. Smoke from a small hearth curls under the roof beams. Damp wool hangs from a peg. Clay vessels cool in a corner where the floor remains dark from yesterday's spilled water. The milk gives off a warm, animal sweetness. But beneath it is a sharper smell, a tang that lifts into the nose and says, very politely, something is happening. You lean closer. The surface has begun to wrinkle. Tiny curds gather like pale clouds in a cloudy sky. A woman beside you dips her fingers into the bowl. Her hands are strong, lined and faintly sour from work. She presses the soft curds together, feeling for firmness. Nearby, a child watches with the solemn expression of someone hoping to be given a taste and pretending not to be obvious about it. Outside, goats scrape their horns against a fence. A fly lands on the rim of a pot and is flicked away with the quick anger it deserves. This is one of the great quiet inventions of human food, the discovery that milk does not have to remain milk. It can be thickened into curds, strained into soft cheese, churned into butter, dried, salted, smoked, clarified, packed, traded, hidden from greedy cousins, and carried much farther than fresh liquid could travel. Milk is fragile, but dairy foods can be sturdy. That is the cleverness. You're watching people turn a brief gift into something with a longer life. A mainstream historical fact rests inside this smoky room. Cheese-making is very ancient, and archaeological evidence from pierced pottery vessels suggests people were straining curds in parts of Europe thousands of years ago. Such vessels allowed liquid whey to drain away while thicker curds remained behind. The tools are humble, almost plain enough to miss: a pot with holes, a basket, a cloth. Yet with these simple things, humans changed the usefulness of milk completely. You lift a strainer made from woven fibres. It is damp and cool, with a faint greasy softness where curds have clung to it. When the thickened milk is poured in, whey begins to drip through in pale yellow threads. The sound is soft, almost sleepy drip. Pause, drip, drip. Each drop falls into a waiting bowl. The curds settle heavier in the basket. You smell sour cream, warm clay, and the faint mineral scent of salt kept in a small pouch like treasure. Salt matters. Salt pulls water away, slows spoilage, sharpens taste, and turns soft food into travel food. Without it, cheese is tender and brief. With it, cheese can become firmer, safer, and more dependable. In places where salt is scarce, it may be precious enough to shape trade routes and arguments. People will cross rough ground for salt. People will guard it, tax it, gift it, and complain about the price, because apparently the complaint economy is also ancient. Butter begins in another rhythm. You watch cream poured into a skin bag, tied closed and rocked back and forth. The motion is patient at first, then more vigorous. The bag slaps against a knee. Liquid thuds inside. Someone hums under their breath to keep time. Churning is not mysterious once you understand it, but to the tired body it is still work. Fat globules gather, cling, and separate from the thinner liquid. Suddenly, what was cream becomes butter grains floating in buttermilk. Food appears through repetition, as if patience itself has curdled into richness. The fresh butter is soft, pale, and cool against your fingers. It smells grassy and sweet, with a faint wildness from the animal and the season. In spring, when pastures are lush, butter may carry a deeper golden shade. In dry months, It may be paler and firmer. You taste a tiny smear on coarse bread or grain cake. It melts quickly, leaving fat on your lips. For people who live with hard labour, fat is precious. It is warmth inside the body. It is energy stored in a form that feels almost luxurious. A small lump can change a meal from survival to comfort. Yet butter is difficult in hot climates. It softens, melts, and can turn rancid. So people invent another trick clarification. Heat the butter gently, separate the milk solids and water, and what remains is a golden fat that keeps better. The pot glows over the hearth, foam rises and is skimmed away. The smell becomes nutty, deeper, almost toasted. The clarified butter gleams like captured sunlight. In many cultures, such fats become cooking mediums, ritual substances, medicines, offerings, and signs of abundance. You can understand why. It looks rich because it is rich. A quirky tidbit follows cheese like a half-remembered campfire tale. One old explanation says the first cheese may have formed when someone carried milk in a bag made from an animal's stomach. Natural enzymes in the stomach lining, especially rennet, could have curdled the milk during travel. Turning it into curds and whey is the story proven in every detail. No. Is it pleasingly awkward and believable enough to survive? Absolutely. You can picture the traveller opening the bag, expecting a drink, and finding a lumpy surprise. A bad day for expectations, a fine day for cuisine. Scholars still debate whether the earliest cheeses came mainly from deliberate souring, accidental curdling in containers, enzyme-rich stomach bags, or practical attempts to make milk easier to digest. The answer may not be one answer at all. Different communities could have discovered different methods, guided by climate, animals, vessels, and luck. Milk is very good at changing by itself. Human genius may have begun with noticing which changes were useful and which changes belonged firmly in the no thank you category. You move through a workspace where several dairy futures are unfolding at once. One bowl holds curds still soft enough to spread. Another contains a firmer cheese pressed under a smooth stone. A third vessel holds whey, thin and sharp, save for cooking or feeding animals. Nothing is wasted casually. Whey can be drunk mixed with grain, used in soups, or given to pigs. The smell is tart and clean, cutting through the heavier air of smoke and dung. It reminds you that dairy is not one product. It is a family of transformations. Pressing cheese changes its body. You place your palm on a flat stone and feel the weight beneath it. Wrapped curds slowly give up moisture. The cloth grows damp. The cheese tightens. More salt may be rubbed across the surface. In some places, cheese is dried in the sun. In others, it is kept cool in caves, cellars, pits, or shaded rooms. Smoke can help preserve it and lend flavour. Herbs may be added. Moulds may appear, sometimes feared, sometimes welcomed. Often judged by smell because the nose is an ancient food safety inspector with no formal training but strong opinions. The atmosphere inside a storage place is different from the dairy room. It is cooler, quieter, and faintly fungal. Your fingers touch a wall slick with condensation. Shelves hold small rounds, lumps, and wrapped bundles. Some cheeses are fresh and mild. Others are sharp enough to make the eyes widen. A mouse rustles somewhere with criminal intent. The darkness feels protective. Here, milk has become time you can hold. This ability to store nourishment reshapes travel. A herder can carry dried curds across open country. A sailor can pack hard cheese on a boat. A farmer can keep butter or clarified fat for leaner days. A trader can exchange dairy foods for grain, tools, cloth, or salt. Milk may begin inside an animal, but cheese and butter enter roads, markets, caravans, and kitchens far away from the udder. They become portable pasture. They also become identity. People learn to love the flavours of their own place. The cheese from one valley tastes of its grasses, animals, water, moulds, hands and weather. The butter from one herd differs from another. This same method does not create the same result everywhere, because milk carries landscape inside it. A bite can taste like spring rain, mountain herbs, sea salt, smoky rafters, or the close green smell of a lowland meadow. Food remembers geography better than people expect. You sit with workers at dusk while the day's curds rest in cloth, the hearth has settled into red coals. A pod of whey and grain thickens slowly. Someone breaks fresh cheese into pieces and passes it around. The texture is soft, slightly squeaky between the teeth, cool at the centre. A child wrinkles their nose, then asks for more. An elder laughs quietly. Outside, the animals settle, hooves shifting in straw, breath steaming in the cooling air. There is no single heroic inventor here. No crowned genius stands in a beam of light declaring, "Behold, cheese." Much more likely, discovery belongs to many anonymous hands, to people who spilled, strained, waited, sniffed, tasted, and tried again. It belongs to the impatient milk, the souring bowl, the stomach bag, the hot stone, the lucky accident, the careful grandmother, the hungry child, the traveller far from home. Civilization often grows from humble experiments repeated until they become tradition. You hold a small round of salted cheese in your palm. It is heavier than the milk it came from, denser, quieter. The surface is rough with crystals. It smells sharp, smoky, and alive. Around you, night gathers over the settlement. The drip of whey has slowed, the churn is silent, the fire sighs. Milk, once so quick to spoil, now rests in new forms, made patient by human attention, in cheese, butter, and clarified fat. You feel a lesson as old as hunger time cannot be stopped, but it can sometimes be persuaded to feed you. You step onto the open grassland, where the sky is so wide it seems almost unreasonable. There are no city walls here, no shaded storage rooms, no neat row of clay vessels waiting politely in a corner. There is wind, grass, animals, and distance. The horizon lies far away in every direction, a pale line that never comes closer no matter how long you ride toward it. Under your boots, the ground is springy with tough steppe grass. It smells of dust, crushed herbs, horse sweat, smoke, and the clean, cold breath of morning. A mare shifts beside you, her coat warm beneath your hand. You feel the tremor of muscle under skin, the twitch of a flank bothered by flies, the steady animal heat rising through your palm. Nearby, a foal nudges impatiently, all knees and soft muzzle, wanting its share. The mare's milk is not yours by right. It must be negotiated carefully, because the foal must drink too. So a herder works with practiced calm, letting the young animal begin, then drawing it back just long enough to milk the mare by hand. The sound is delicate compared with the vastness around you. A small stream of milk taps into a wooden pail. Leather creaks. A horse snorts. Farther away, sheep and goats scatter over the grass like moving stones. Dogs bark with the deep seriousness of officials who have appointed themselves guardians of everything. A child laughs from the doorway of a felt tent. The wind carries the sound away almost at once. Here, milk belongs to movement. A settled farmer can build walls, dig storage pits, and stay near fields. A pastoral nomad carries life across seasons. The herd is food, transport, clothing, fuel, status, and map. Animals lead people to pasture, and people lead animals to water. The route is not random wandering. It is knowledge held in memory where snow melts first, where summer grass grows sweetest, where wells are hidden, where strangers might be friends, rivals, or people best admired from a healthy distance. A mainstream historical fact rises clearly in this landscape across the Eurasian steppe. Pastoral peoples depended heavily on horses, sheep, goats, cattle, camels, and other herd animals, and fermented mare's milk, often known today by names such as kumis or ayrag, became a major drink in many nomadic cultures. Fresh mare's milk contains more lactose than cow's milk, but fermentation changes it. Yeasts and bacteria transform sugars, creating a tart, lightly alcoholic drink that can be easier to tolerate and much more practical than fresh milk left sulking in the sun. You sit inside a round felt dwelling, its walls softly glowing with filtered daylight. The air is close but comforting. It smells of wool, smoke, leather, warm milk, and the faint sour sparkle of fermentation. A skin bag hangs near the entrance, swollen and dark from long use. Each person who passes gives it a push, a slap, or a shake. This is not random fidgeting, though it does look like the household has agreed to gently bully a bag all day. The motion keeps the fermenting milk mixed. It invites the invisible workers, yeasts and bacteria, to continue their busy little feast. Someone pours the drink into a shallow cup and places it in your hands. The cup feels smooth at the rim and cool against your fingers. You lift it and smell sharpness, cream, grass, and a faint prickle like bread dough waking up. The taste is surprising sour, lively, thin yet nourishing, with a gentle fizz and a warmth that arrives late. It is not the soft sweetness many modern people expect from milk. It is awake, very awake. You can imagine it looking at fresh milk and saying, kindly but firmly, "You lack personality. Fermented milk suits the steppe because it travels. It can be carried in leather bags on horseback. The motion of riding churns and mixes it. Heat may sour fresh milk dangerously, but controlled souring gives people a way to drink, feed, and preserve. It also creates a social ritual. Guests may be offered a cup as part of welcome. Refusing can be awkward. Accepting means you join, for a moment. The circle of the tent, the herd, the weather, and the host's pride. Hospitality on the grassland is not decorative. In a place where distance can kill, welcome is practical holiness. Outside, the herd moves like a living weather system. Horses graze with heads low, tails flicking. Camels kneel with magnificent irritation, as if the entire world has disappointed them personally. Sheep make soft tearing sounds as they crop grass. A yak in a colder highland camp breathes steam into thin air, its long hair moving in the wind like a dark curtain, in different regions. People milk different animals, mares on the steppe, camels in arid lands, yaks in high mountains, reindeer in northern zones, goats and sheep almost everywhere they can be persuaded to behave. Each milk has its own body. Camel milk can taste salty and faintly sweet. Yak milk is rich and high in fat. Mare's milk is lighter and quick to ferment. Reindeer milk is extremely rich, the sort of milk that arrives wearing a fur cloak and refusing to apologize. A quirky tidbit travels with fermented mare's milk. Some old accounts claim that steppe warriors, including groups feared by settled neighbors, drank so much kumis that outsiders treated it almost like a secret fuel. Greek and later writers described horse-milking peoples with a mixture of fascination, discomfort, and dramatic imagination. Foreign observers often made nomads sound mysterious, wild, and slightly magical, which is what happens when people who live behind walls meet people who can cross huge distances faster than rumours. Yet daily life is less mythical and more disciplined. Milking mares requires timing through the day. A mare may only let down milk when her foal is near. The yield from each milking is small, so repetition matters. People may milk several times daily, taking a little each time. Children help, elders supervise. Skilled hands know when an animal is stressed, tired, ready, or annoyed. The whole camp listens to the herd. A change in sound can mean weather shifting, predators nearby. or a loose animal testing everyone's patience. Researchers still disagree over exactly how early widespread horse milking began on the steppe, and how quickly it became central to diet, ritual, and identity. Archaeologists study residues in pots, wear on horse teeth, animal bones, and traces of human proteins to understand the pattern. But the evidence is complicated. A horse can be ridden, eaten, milked, traded, sacrificed, admired, or stolen. And the bones do not always explain which role mattered most in a given place. The past, once again, refuses to label its jars clearly. Very inconsiderate, you walk beyond the tents at dusk. The atmosphere turns blue and silver. Smoke rises in thin columns, then flattens under the wind. The ground cools quickly through the soles of your boots. A rope brushes your wrist, rough with hair and dust. Somewhere a baby cries, then quiets as someone sings in a low rocking voice. The song has the rhythm of hooves, slow and circling. In the distance, horses move as dark shapes against a fading sky. Fermented dairy is not only drink, it can become a base for other foods. Curds may be dried into hard pieces that last through journeys. Yogurt-like foods may be strained. Butter may be churned from richer milks. Dried cheese can be tucked into bags and softened later in the water or tea. On the Tibetan plateau and in Himalayan regions, yak milk becomes butter, cheese, and tea enriched with fat, warming people against high cold. You hold a bowl of butter tea between your palms and feel heat seep into your fingers. It smells of salt, smoke, and cream. The first sip is startling if you expect sweetness, but then the body understands. At altitude, warmth and fat are not luxuries. They are strategy. In camel lands, the rhythm changes again. You feel desert air against your face, dry enough to steal moisture from your lips. Camel milk arrives as resilience made liquid. It can feed people where cattle struggle, where pastures are sparse and where water is uncertain. A camel kneels in the dust, groaning with theatrical despair. The milker works close to its side, calm and alert. The milk foams into a bowl, smelling faintly salty, warm, and grassy. Around you, the desert is quiet except for the creak of leather and the soft grind of sand under feet. Across all these landscapes, milk becomes a way of living with uncertainty. Crops are rooted, herds move. When drought comes, people may travel to better grazing. When snow seals one valley, they seek another. When politics shifts, nomads can vanish into distances that frustrate empires. Milk from moving animals gives pastoral life flexibility. It is not easy freedom. It is skilled, watchful, exhausting freedom. Romantic, sometimes. Comfortable. Let us not get carried away. The wind is beautiful, yes, but it also finds every gap in your clothing like it has been personally invited. You return to the felt tent as night settles fully. Stars appear with icy brightness. The skin bag is stirred again, slower now. A cup passes from hand to hand. Faces glow in firelight, lined by weather and softened by talk. The drink is sour on your tongue, and its warmth spreads gently through your chest. You hear animals breathing outside, the low murmur of people inside, the flap of felt at the doorway, the endless wind combing the grass. In this world, milk is not a quiet kitchen substance. It is movement, adaptation, and companionship with herds. It is the mare's patience, the camel's endurance, the yak's mountain richness, the goat's unstoppable mischief. It is bacteria and yeast making invisible music inside a swinging bag. It is the taste of travel, welcome, and survival under a sky too large to own. You hold the cup a little longer, feeling its rim against your fingertips, while the grassland breathes in the dark around you. You walk into a world where milk is no longer only food in the hand, but meaning in the mind. The street beneath your sandals is worn smooth by traffic, carts, animals, pilgrims, soldiers, merchants, and all the other restless feet that make empires feel both grand and slightly overcrowded. Somewhere nearby, a cow lows from a courtyard, a temple bell rings, a baker lifts flatbread from hot stone, the air carries smoke, olive oil, incense, sweat, damp wool, and the soft sour scent of milk warming in a clay pot. In the Greek world, you find milk treated with curiosity and caution. It is familiar, but not always central to adult drinking in the way wine is. Wine has poetry, politics, symposiums, and men reclining as though leaning sideways makes opinions wiser. Milk belongs more to children, herders, rustic life, healing, and the bodies of animals. Yet it is still respected. Physicians write about foods and their effects. Milk can be recommended for certain conditions, depending on the patient, season, animal, and theory of the body. You can almost see a healer lifting a cup, sniffing it thoughtfully, and deciding whether goat's milk, sheep's milk, or cow's milk will soothe the complaint, or possibly create a new one. A mainstream historical fact sits clearly in this medical world. Ancient Greek and Roman writers discussed milk and dairy products in relation to diet, health, and social custom. They noticed differences between animal milks and argued about digestion, strength, moisture, and balance. Their explanations were shaped by humoral medicine, the idea that health depended on balancing qualities in the body. The science was not modern, but the observation was real. Milk was not just swallowed, it was classified, judged, prescribed, and occasionally blamed, which is one of humanity's favourite ways to treat food. You enter a Roman household where the floor is cool underfoot and painted walls glow in afternoon shade. A servant carries a bowl of fresh cheese sprinkled with herbs. The cheese smells of salt, milk fat, and green leaves crushed between fingers. Outside, carts groan over paving stones. A fountain murmurs. Somewhere in the kitchen, a bronze pot knocks against another with a hollow clang. Romans enjoyed cheese in many forms, from simple farm cheese to sharper aged kinds. Soldiers and travellers value compact foods. Rural estates depend on animal products. City markets carry curds, cheeses, and butter, though butter is often viewed more as a northern or foreign habit than as the refined fat of Roman cooking. Olive oil, naturally, has better public relations. There is gentle snobbery here. Some Mediterranean writers associate heavy milk drinking with pastoral peoples, mountain dwellers, or outsiders. The sophisticated citizen may praise farming while also preferring not to smell too much like a goat pen. Very dignified, very human. Food becomes a boundary. What you drink says where you belong, who raised you, and whether someone might quietly call you rustic when you leave the room. Then you move into Jewish households and sacred law, where milk carries rules as well as nourishment. You stand in a courtyard at dusk while lamps are lit and cooking smoke rises into cooling air. A pot of milk simmers gently, its surface trembling. Nearby, meat is handled separately. The textures of daily life are careful, smooth wooden bowls, rough woven cloths, warm bread, cool storage jars, clean hands moving with practiced attention. Dietary law shapes the kitchen into a moral landscape. Milk and meat are not simply ingredients. Their separation becomes a way of ordering life, remembering commandment, and turning ordinary meals into acts of discipline. The smell is homely and serious at once. Warm milk, toasted grain, herbs, ash, and oil mingle under a low roof. You hear quiet conversation, a child asking a question, an elder answering with patience that has been used many times before. Rules can feel restrictive from the outside, but within a community they can also create rhythm, identity, and belonging. a spoon placed in one vessel, and not another may carry generations of meaning. This is domestic history at its most intimate faith, living in bowls, shelves, and the timing of meals. In early Christian imagination, milk becomes a symbol of spiritual infancy, instruction, and purity. You feel this in a gathering where voices echo softly against stone walls and oil lamps flicker in the dimness. The air smells of wax, wool, damp plaster, and human closeness. New believers may be described metaphorically as needing milk before solid food, a language of gentleness and growth. Mothers nursing infants become images of care. The Virgin Mary, in later Christian art and devotion, can be shown as a nourishing mother, and milk itself may take on associations of mercy, tenderness, and grace. A quirky tidbit appears in medieval Christian legend, where stories of saints sometimes describe miraculous milk, nursing visions, or sacred nourishment in ways that sound strange to modern ears, but made emotional sense in a world where bodily care and divine compassion were deeply linked. One famous theme, sometimes called the lactation of a holy figure, imagines milk as a channel of blessing or wisdom. It may seem surprising, perhaps even awkwardly intimate, but it shows how powerfully people connected milk with life, teaching, and comfort. Now you travel into South Asia, where the atmosphere changes with colour, heat, and sound. A conch sounds in the distance. Bells ring from a temple. Flowers lie in bright heaps, marigold and jasmine, their fragrance mixing with ghee, smoke, sandalwood, and wet stone. You feel warm dust cling to your ankles. A cow stands in the shade, flicking flies with her tail. In Hindu traditions, milk and dairy foods become deeply important in ritual and everyday life. Milk, curd, butter, and ghee are used in offerings, cooking, cleansing rites, and festival foods. Ghee in particular, clarified butter, shines with religious and culinary significance. It feeds lamps, enriches food, and appears in sacrificial fire rituals. You watch milk poured over a sacred image in a temple ritual. The sound is soft and continuous, a pale stream over dark stone. Hands move slowly, the air is thick with incense. Devotees press forward, not noisily, but with an intensity that fills the room. Milk here is abundance made visible. It is purity, generosity, and auspiciousness. It is also labour. Animals, women and men rising early, vessels cleaned, fires tended, markets supplied. Ritual beauty rarely floats free from work. Someone always had to wash the pot. Cows hold special significance in many Hindu contexts, associated with generosity, motherhood, and non-violence. Though real practices have varied across regions, periods, and communities, the reverence is not a single flat idea. It is layered with economy, theology, village life, politics, and household affection. A cow may be sacred symbol, source of milk, member of a domestic world, and source of argument all at once. Humans do enjoy making simple things complicated. Cows, presumably, continue chewing. In Islamic societies, milk carries its own tenderness and blessing. You find yourself in a courtyard cooled by evening shade. The call to prayer rises and fades across rooftops. A brass cup is passed to you, filled with fresh milk or a dairy drink, scented lightly with the animal and the vessel that holds it. The surface is pale under lamplight. Islamic tradition contains positive associations with milk as wholesome nourishment, and across Muslim lands, dairy foods become part of hospitality, medicine, pastoral life, and regional cuisine. Yogurt, clarified butter, cheeses, and milk drinks appear from North Africa to Central Asia, from Anatolia to Arabia and beyond. Hospitality has a texture. The cup is smooth from many hands. The floor mat scratches gently against your palm when you sit. You hear sandals at the threshold, quiet greetings, the splash of water before prayer, the low murmur of guests settling. A bowl of yogurt may cool a hot meal. A spoonful of clarified butter may enrich rice or bread. In arid regions, camel milk may be prized for endurance and nourishment. In mountain zones, sheep and goat milk become cheeses and thick yogurts. Faith gives meaning, but climate shapes the menu. Theology may lift the cup, yet weather fills it. Specialists continue to debate how much religious symbolism around milk grew from older pastoral experience, how much from written teaching, and how much from the emotional force of motherhood and purity that appears across many cultures. It is tempting to say milk always means the same thing everywhere, but that would flatten the story too much. The same white liquid can be medicine in one text, offering in another, taboo boundary in another, feast food in another, and lullaby comfort in a quiet room where no scholar is watching. Across these empires and faiths, milk becomes a language. It can say healing, it can say innocence, it can say discipline, it can say hospitality, it can say wealth, purity, foreignness, blessing, childhood, or restraint. It enters law, metaphor, sacrifice, art, and daily cooking. It is poured for gods, given to guests, withheld by rule, mixed into remedies, churned for lamps, and served to children whose sleepy eyes close before the cup is empty. You end the day beside a small lamp burning with clarified butter. Its flame is steady and gold. Around it, shadows rest on walls like folded cloth. Outside, the world of empire continues with taxes, roads, armies, markets, and officials who would probably like another list. Inside, milk has become quieter and deeper than administration. You taste it in soft cheese, smell it in ghee smoke, hear it in the careful clink of ritual vessels, feel it in the warmth of a cup passed between hands. It nourishes the body, yes, but it also feeds imagination. And in the hush of evening, that may be why people keep returning to it, not only because they are hungry, but because milk makes life feel held. You step into a medieval morning with mud under your shoes and mist resting low over the fields. The village is awake in pieces. A rooster announces himself with the confidence of someone who has never once paid rent. Cows shift in a byre, their warm breath clouding the cold air. Sheep pressed together in a soft, woolly mass. Somewhere behind a timber wall, a wooden pail knocks against a stool, and milk begins to strike the bottom in quick pale streams. The smell is thick and earthy wet straw, smoke from peat and wood, sour whey, warm dung, leather, onions, and the faint sweetness of hay stored in a loft. You push open a low door and enter a barn attached to a house, because in many places animals and people live close enough to share heat, smells, noise, and the occasional deep philosophical disagreement over space. The air inside is warmer than outside. Your fingers brush a rough beam polished by hands, shoulders, and years of use. A cow stands tethered in the dimness. Her hide is warm beneath your palm, slightly dusty, alive with small twitches. The milker sits low, knees bent, wool skirt or tunic gathered away from the pail. Hands move in a steady rhythm. This is not decorative country life. This is labour before breakfast, and often before daylight has fully committed to the idea of morning. Milk belongs to routine, but routine does not mean easy. It means you do it whether your back aches, whether the weather is foul, whether the cow is calm, or whether she's woken with the personality of a gate hinge. A mainstream historical fact shapes this world clearly throughout much of medieval Europe. Dairy work was strongly associated with women's labour, especially within households and manorial economies, though men also handled herding, transport, and large-scale management in many regions. Women milked animals, strained milk, churned butter, made cheese, sold surplus in markets, and guarded household dairy knowledge with practical seriousness. Their skill could mean the difference between waste and winter food. It is quiet expertise. The kind history often leaves in the margins because nobody carved a statue of someone successfully saving the cream. You carry fresh milk toward a small dairy room, a cool space set apart from the heat of the hearth. The floor is damp stone. Shelves hold bowls of cream, crocks of soured milk, wrapped cheeses, and wooden tools scrubbed pale from use. The room smells sharp and clean compared with the barn, but still a live lactic tang, salt, wet wood, and old stone. You hear the faint drip of whey from a hanging cloth. It is a patient sound, perfect for drowsy listening, if one can ignore the fact that someone must clean everything again very soon. Cleanliness matters, though not in the modern stainless steel way. Milk spoils quickly, and medieval people know this through experience, not laboratory diagrams. Pails are rinsed, scalded when fuel allows, rubbed, dried, hung away from animals, and watched with suspicion. A wooden vessel can keep smells, a careless hand can ruin a batch. A warm day can turn promise into regret. People learn by nose, tongue, texture, and consequences. The nose bends over a bowl. Is it sweet? Is it pleasantly sour? Is it ready for cheese? Or has it entered the small kingdom of absolutely not? The churn waits by the wall, tall and wooden. Cream is poured in, thick and pale. Then the dasher begins its slow plunge and lift. The sound is wet, hollow, and repetitive. Thump, pull, thump, pull. Your arms tire quickly. The person beside you gives no sympathy, which is fair because butter does not become butter through feelings. The cream resists, sloshes, foams, and suddenly changes. Tiny yellow grains gather. The liquid thins. A smile appears in the room, brief but real. Butter has come. Butter is wealth you can spread with a knife. In northern climates, where olive oil is rare or expensive, butter and animal fats are essential to cooking. Butter goes into pottages, pastries, sauces, and humble bread. It can be salted for keeping, packed into pots, wrapped in leaves, or sent to market. In some damp regions, people bury butter in peat bogs, where the cool, low-oxygen conditions preserve it surprisingly well. That sounds like a prank by archaeology. But bog butter is real enough. Lumps of ancient dairy fat have been found in wetlands, sometimes still carrying the ghost of their old smell. Imagine losing your butter in a bog and having someone discover it centuries later. Your grocery storage choices have become cultural heritage. Congratulations. Cheese has its own medieval personality. Soft cheeses feed households quickly. Harder cheeses travel. Monasteries, villages, and upland farms develop local habits suited to pasture, climate, and animal breeds. You stand in a monastery dairy where the air feels cooler, calmer, and slightly more disciplined, as if even the cheese has taken vows. A monk or lay worker turns rounds on a shelf. The rind feels dry under your fingertips. A small wheel gives off a nutty, sharp smell. Bells ring faintly from the church. Outside, rain taps on roof tiles, and cattle low beyond a wall. Monasteries can be important centres of land management, animal husbandry, record keeping, and food production. They own estates, collect rents, feed communities, offer hospitality, and sometimes sell surplus. Dairy products fit neatly into this organised life. Butter, cheese, and milk help feed monks, guests, labourers, and the poor who come to the gate. A dairy attached to a monastery is not merely a kitchen room. It is part of an economic engine powered by prayer, land, work, and very tired wrists. Religion also reaches into the dairy bowl. Fasting rules in medieval Christianity often restrict meat, and at many times and places they restrict animal products such as milk, butter, cheese, and eggs, especially during Lent. Rules vary by region, period and level of enforcement, because human beings are wonderfully consistent at being inconsistent. In colder dairy-rich areas, people may seek permission to use butter during fasts when oil is scarce. This creates one of the great quirky facts of medieval food history payments, for butter exemptions helped fund church-building projects in some places, including famous butter towers associated with cathedrals. Spiritual discipline, architectural ambition, and toast all meet in one very medieval arrangement. You move into a town market and the mood changes at once. Streets narrow, stalls crowd together, pigs root near drains with revolting confidence. Bells ring from a church tower, a cartwheel splashes mud against your hem. The air smells of fish, ale, damp wool, herbs, horse manure, frying cakes, and sharp cheese. Women stand behind baskets of butter wrapped in leaves or cloth. Fresh cheeses sit in rounds and lumps. A customer presses a piece, sniffs, frowns, and bargains as if the fate of kingdoms rests on 3 small coins. Milk itself is harder to sell safely in crowded towns. It is heavy, perishable, and easily watered down by the dishonest or the merely optimistic. A townswoman buying milk must trust the seller, inspect the colour, smell the vessel, and perhaps grumble loudly enough to lower the price. Regulations may appear in urban markets, with officials checking weights, measures, and quality. Nobody wants watered milk, stale butter, or cheese that has crossed from bold flavour into personal insult. Yet fraud happens. So does spoilage. So does blame. The medieval market is lively because everyone is hungry and nobody entirely trusts anyone else's scale. Specialists still debate how much ordinary townspeople relied on fresh milk compared with cheese, butter, ale, bread, and pottage, because records often preserve taxes, rents, and rules more clearly than breakfast. What people ate also varied by class, region, season, age, and access to animals. A peasant household with a cow may taste milk often. A poor urban labourer may more often meet dairy as cheese scraps, buttermilk, or a little butter in a cooked dish. A wealthy household may command cream, delicate fresh cheeses, and rich sauces while pretending this is all perfectly normal. Wealth has always been excellent at acting casual. You enter a manor kitchen near evening. The hearth is wide and hot, breathing orange light across blackened pots. A cook stirs a thick pottage while a dairymaid brings in buttermilk. The liquid is pale and sour, left from churning, useful in bread, soups, and everyday meals. Nothing about it feels luxurious, but it nourishes nearby. Butter melts in a small pan with herbs, releasing a smell so comforting that even the sternest steward might soften for half a heartbeat. The atmosphere is smoky, close, and full of motion. Knives chop, bowls scrape, dogs wait at strategic locations, pretending not to hope. Dairy marks status, but it also marks season. In spring and early summer, animals freshen, grass improves, gas and milk flows more generously, cheese-making intensifies, butter becomes more available. In winter, fresh milk may be scarce, and households rely on stored cheese, salted butter, dried foods, grain, beans, and whatever else has survived damp, mice, taxes, and human appetite. You feel the year in the dairy room abundance in warm months, careful counting in cold months, always the fear that a poor pasture or sick animal will tighten every meal. Touch the household cheese knife, its handle worn smooth. Touch the cool crock of cream set in water. Touch the rough cloth stained by curds. These are tools of survival, not quaint decorations. The people using them understand transformation as daily craft. Milk becomes butter for selling. Whey becomes animal feed. Skimmed milk becomes soup. Cream becomes pride. Cheese becomes rent, gift, meal, and market good. A cow or ewe is not merely an animal. She is time, labour, risk, and hope standing on 4 legs. Night settles over the village with a damp hush. Animals breathe behind wooden partitions. The last milk has been strained. The churn is silent. A small cheese rests under weight, slowly giving up its way drop by drop. You sit near the banked hearth, hands smelling faintly of salt and sour milk, shoulders heavy with the day's work. Outside, rain begins again, soft on thatch, steady on mud, gentle against the dark. In this medieval world, milk is both humble and powerful. It moves through women's hands, monastic accounts, market stalls, fasting rules, rent payments, and hungry bowls. It spoils if neglected, enriches if cared for, and argues quietly with weather, law, and appetite. You feel its place not as a grand invention, but as a daily thread woven through barns, kitchens, cloisters, and streets, warm from the animal, sharp in the cheese room, golden in the churn. It keeps households breathing through the long, damp centuries. You arrive in a city that never really sleeps, only coughs, clatters, and changes shifts. Dawn slides through a haze of coal smoke, turning windows dull silver and roofs the colour of old iron. Horses stamp in the street, cart wheels grind over cobbles. A factory whistle screams so sharply it feels as if the morning itself has been scolded awake. The air smells of soot, wet brick, horse manure, hot metal, cheap bread, river fog, and somewhere beneath it all, milk beginning to sour in a dented can. You stand on a crowded street where families live stacked in rooms too small for their own breathing. Children lean from windows. Laundry hangs like tired flags. Vendors shout over one another, selling oysters, onions, matches, newspapers, and milk. Especially milk. The city wants it badly. Babies need it. Children are told to drink it. Workers pour it into tea or coffee. Invalids sip it from spoons. The old comfort has entered a new world of speed, poverty, distance, and invisible danger. Milk no longer comes only from an animal nearby, watched by familiar eyes. It now travels through chains of strangers. A cow may be kept in a filthy urban shed or on a farm far outside the city. The milk is drawn into a pail, poured into a can, carried by cart, train, boat or handcart, then sold door to door or from a shop. Every transfer is a chance for dust, dirty water, heat, bacteria, or dishonesty to enter. It is still pale and mild in the cup. That is the unsettling part. Trouble does not always announce itself with a trumpet. Sometimes it arrives looking perfectly creamy. A mainstream historical fact shapes this smoky age during the 19th and early 20th centuries. Contaminated milk became a major public health concern in rapidly growing cities, especially because it could spread diseases such as tuberculosis, typhoid fever, scarlet fever, and diphtheria. Infants and young children were particularly vulnerable. Families often trusted milk as pure nourishment, yet it could carry sickness from infected cows, unclean containers, watered supplies, or handlers who did not understand germs. The cup on the table could be care and risk at the same time. You follow a milk cart through the morning streets. The horses' flanks steam in the cold. Metal cans rattle against one another, their lids clinking like dull bells. The driver's coat smells of rain, leather, and old cream. He stops outside a row of houses, dips a measure into the can, and pours milk into whatever vessel a customer brings: jug, bowl, pitcher, cracked teapot, anything that can hold liquid and hope. A woman sniffs her purchase, frowns, pays anyway. Her baby is crying upstairs. Suspicion is a luxury when hunger has a schedule. The soundscape is busy and rough. Pails knock on steps. Children run barefoot through puddles. A street sweeper curses softly at a stubborn pile of muck. Somewhere a piano plays behind a closed door, thin notes drifting into the damp air. Milk moves through this noise in metal and glass. Ordinary and urgent, The city's appetite is enormous. Its trust is stretched thin. One of the darkest urban scandals involves what people called swill milk. In some cities, especially notorious in 19th century New York, cows were kept near distilleries and fed hot waste mash from alcohol production. The animals often lived in cramped, unhealthy conditions and gave poor milk, which sellers might disguise with additives. It is a quirky tidbit only in the grimly absurd sense that humans looked at sick cows in foul sheds and thought, yes, this seems like a fine plan for babies. Some milk was reportedly whitened or thickened with substances such as chalk, flour, or starch, and sometimes coloured to look richer. The result was profitable, deceptive, and dangerous. You enter one of these urban cowsheds in imagination, and the atmosphere presses close. There is no green pasture, no wind over grass. The floor is slick. The air is hot with breath and fermentation. Cows stand packed together, their hides dull, their eyes tired. You hear chains scrape, hooves shift, flies swarm, liquid splash into pails. The smell is overwhelming: sour mash, manure, old straw, feverish animal heat. Your hand touches a wooden post made greasy by years of contact. In this place, milk feels less like pastoral abundance and more like the city trying to manufacture countryside in a cellar. Very efficient, very terrible. Yet the same age that creates the milk problem also begins to solve it. Science enters quietly at first, with microscopes, experiments, public lectures, hospital records, and arguments that sound far too technical for exhausted parents, but matter deeply. Germ theory changes everything. If disease can travel through invisible organisms, then cleanliness is not just a virtue, it is a defense. Heat becomes more than cooking. It becomes protection. Pasteurization, name for Louis Pasteur's work on microbes and fermentation, is adapted for milk to reduce dangerous bacteria by heating the liquid to controlled temperatures. The idea faces resistance. Some people dislike the taste. Some distrust the process. Some farmers fear cost. Some doctors argue over methods. Some customers believe raw milk is more natural and therefore better, as if nature has never once produced anything rude. Public health reformers, paediatricians, and city officials push for cleaner dairies, inspected herds, sealed bottles, and pasteurized milk stations, especially for infants. You stand in a laboratory where the air smells of alcohol lamps, warm glass, soap, and paper. Light catches on rows of bottles. A scientist bends over a microscope, and the room grows almost reverent, not because the equipment is grand, but because it reveals what the eye cannot see. A drop of milk becomes a world. Tiny forms move, multiply, threaten, or harmlessly ferment. The old sensory skills of smell and taste remain useful, but they are no longer enough. Milk has entered the age of invisible evidence. Public health historians still argue whether the greatest improvements came from pasteurization itself, from cleaner animal management, from refrigeration, from better infant care, from safer water, or from the combined pressure of all these changes acting together. The debate matters because no single invention saves a city by itself. A hot process cannot fix a dirty pail if the milk is contaminated again. A clean dairy cannot help if delivery takes too long in summer heat. A law cannot protect anyone if no one enforces it. Civilization, as usual, requires both ideas and boring follow-through, especially the boring follow-through. Now you move into a cleaner dairy plant early in the 20th century, the contrast is striking. The floor is wet but washed. Steam rises from pipes. Workers wear pale coats and rubber boots. Glass bottles clink along a line, clear, heavy, and shining. The smell is still milky, but sharper with soap, metal, and hot water. A bottle-filling machine pulses rhythmically. Milk flows in controlled streams. Caps are pressed into place. Labels promise purity, safety, strength, and sometimes moral improvement, because advertising has never been shy. The glass bottle changes the relationship between seller and customer. Sealed containers reduce tampering and contamination. A cream line at the top lets buyers see richness, or at least believe they can. Delivery becomes more organised. Milkmen rise early, rattling through streets while curtains are still drawn. Bottles wait on steps in the cool dawn. Children learn the familiar sound of glass against metal crates. The city begins to trust milk again, though not without rules, inspections, and many meetings. Humanity's favourite cure for panic. Refrigeration also transforms milk's journey. Ice wagons, cooled rail cars, and mechanical refrigeration lengthen the safe distance between farm and city. You feel the chill in an ice-cooled storage room, where your breath fogs slightly and a metal cans stand in neat rows. The air smells clean, cold, and faintly sweet. Your fingers stick for a moment to a damp handle. Cold slows spoilage and gives milk a calmer life. Not eternal, certainly. Milk is still milk, dramatic as ever. But the race against time becomes less frantic. At the same time, chemistry and regulation expose fraud. Lactometers measure density. Butterfat tests reveal richness. Inspectors visit farms and shops. Veterinary medicine tracks disease in herds. Municipal milk commissions grade supplies. Arguments erupt over standards, costs, and who must pay. Farmers complain about burdens. Reformers complain about deaths. Dealers complain about everything, because middlemen have a spiritual obligation to sigh loudly. Through all this noise, milk becomes one of the first everyday foods placed under modern scientific surveillance. You enter a tenement room in the evening and the walls are damp. A stove gives weak heat. A mother warms a bottle in a pan of water, testing drops on her wrist. The gesture is ancient, but the bottle may have come from a pasteurized milk depot. Outside, the city roars. Inside, the room narrows around a child's breathing. You hear the soft suckling sound, the scrape of a chair, the muffled cough from the next room. Public health can sound abstract in official reports, but here it is intimate. It is whether this child drinks safely tonight. Milk also becomes moral theatre. Posters show bright children, clean kitchens, shining cows, and sturdy bodies. Reformers connect milk with national strength, family duty, and modern hygiene. Schools begin serving milk to children in some places, partly to improve nutrition and partly to create habits. Doctors recommend it. Companies brand it. Governments regulate it. The simple drink becomes a symbol of progress, cleanliness, and scientific care. It is still produced by animals, but it now wears the uniform of modernity. You walk back onto the street as electric lights flicker awake. The old milk cart has nearly vanished into traffic, replaced in some places by motor vehicles and organised delivery routes. The city smells different at night. Coal smoke, rain, fried food, damp wool, hot engines, and a faint clean note from washed bottles stacked outside a dairy shop. The transformation is not perfect. Inequality remains. Rural producers struggle. Raw milk debates continue. Mistakes happen. But something fundamental has shifted. Milk has become a public question, not only a household matter. You hold a glass bottle in both hands. It is cool, smooth, and heavier than expected. Cream gathers at the top in a pale band. Light from a shop window passes through the glass, making the milk glow softly in the dark. Inside that whiteness is a whole city's struggle farms, railways, laboratories, laws, mothers, inspectors, germs, reformers, sellers, and children. Milk has survived the industrial city by becoming scientific, regulated, chilled, sealed, and argued over. It remains comfort, but now comfort with paperwork, thermometers, and a microscope watching from the corner. You stand beside a railway platform in the cool grey light of early morning, where milk cans wait in tidy rows like metal soldiers with very perishable secrets. Steam drifts from a locomotive. Porters shout. A whistle cuts the air, sharp enough to make pigeons rise from the station roof in a flustered cloud. The platform smells of coal smoke, wet wood, iron rails, horse sweat, and cold cream. When you touch one of the cans, the metal chills your fingertips, slick with condensation. Milk has become a traveller now, not a casual traveller with a small bag and optimistic shoes, but a disciplined passenger in a vast system of schedules, containers, cooling, testing, pricing, and paperwork. It moves from farms to cities, from islands to continents, from cows in green valleys to children in dry inland towns who may never see a dairy animal at all. The drink that once depended on nearness now depends on networks. A mainstream historical fact shapes this new world clearly during the late 19th and 20th centuries: railways, refrigeration, pasteurization, bottling, and later tanker trucks allowed dairy industries to expand far beyond local markets. Milk could be collected from many farms, cooled, processed, and distributed across much greater distances. That changed not only what people drank, but how rural landscapes worked. Farms were no longer feeding only neighbouring households and nearby towns. They were feeding systems. You follow the milk from the platform into a creamery where the morning's already busy. The building hums with machinery. Belts turn, pipes tremble softly. Workers in pale coats move between vats, gauges, and shining tanks. The air is damp and cool, filled with the smell of warm milk, steam, soap, and metal. A floor drain gurgles under your feet. Somewhere a separator spins so fast it seems to turn the room into a low mechanical lullaby. The cream separator is one of those inventions that does not look romantic, which is probably why it changed so much. It uses centrifugal force to separate cream from skim milk quickly and consistently. Instead of waiting for cream to rise slowly in shallow pans, dairies can process larger quantities at speed. Fat becomes a measurable product. Cream, butter, skim milk, and later standardized drinking milk become parts of a managed flow. You can almost feel milk becoming arithmetic. In a testing room, a small sample is heated, measured, and examined. Butter-fat content matters. Cleanliness matters. Temperature matters. The farmer is paid not simply for volume, but often for quality. This creates a new relationship between the farm and the factory. A cow's milk enters a broader economy, where numbers decide value. The pail has become data, which is useful. Yes, though perhaps not soothing to the cow. Outside, the countryside adjusts. Cooperative creameries appear in many dairy regions, allowing farmers to pool milk, share equipment, and sell processed products more effectively. You enter one such cooperative on a rainy day. Farmers arrive with cans balanced on carts or wagons. Their boots are muddy, their hands are red from cold. They talk prices, weather, feed, and rumours. The room feels like a meeting place as much as a workplace. Steam fogs the windows. A ledger lies open on a desk, its pages marked with careful names and figures. Milk has become collective. No single household can easily manage the scale of this machine alone. Standards must be agreed. Collection times must be honoured. Animals must be bred for higher yield. Feed must be grown or bought. Veterinary care becomes more organised. Breeds like Holstein Friesians become famous for production, their black and white coats turning into one of the most recognisable patterns in the modern food world. A cow becomes not only an animal, but an engine of efficiency, which sounds impressive until you remember engines do not get sore hooves. You step into a barn built for production. The atmosphere is warm, rhythmic, and close. Cows stand in rows, chewing with calm indifference to industrial history. Milking machines pulse with a soft, rubbery beat. Vacuum lines hiss. Stainless steel pipes carry milk away before it meets the open air. The smell is hay, manure, iodine wash, warm hide, grain feed, and fresh milk. Your hand brushes the flank of a cow, and the heat of her body cuts through the cool barn air. Mechanization changes labour. It reduces some forms of backbreaking handwork, but introduces new tasks: machine cleaning, herd monitoring, scheduling, repairs, breeding records, feed calculations, and constant attention to hygiene. The dairy farmer becomes part herder, part mechanic, part accountant, part night shift employee of animals who do not respect weekends. Milk is collected at dawn, midnight, holidays, storms, and family birthdays. Cows are very traditional about needing to be milked. Then milk becomes powder. You enter a drying facility where the air is warm and faintly sweet, almost bakery-like, though sharper with hot milk solids. Liquid milk is sprayed into heated chambers, where water evaporates and fine powder falls like pale dust. The powder is soft between your fingers, dry, light, and faintly sticky. This is a new kind of dairy magic, not mystical, just practical enough to feel like cheating. Remove the water, and milk can cross oceans, survive storage, feed armies, supply hospitals, reach colonies as camps, schools, and disaster zones. Powdered milk expands dairy into global politics and trade. It can be shipped where fresh milk cannot. It can support infant feeding programs, military rations, famine relief, commercial baking, chocolate production, and household cupboards. It also creates dependence on international markets. A country with surplus milk can turn it into butter, cheese, casein, condensed milk, or powder, and sell it elsewhere. Prices rise and fall. Farmers celebrate or suffer. Governments intervene. Milk begins to behave less like a cup and more like a commodity with moods. Condensed milk adds its own sweet chapter to this machine. Thick, canned, and sugary. It becomes valuable where refrigeration is limited. You open a small tin and smell caramel, metal, and cooked cream. It pours slowly, glossy and heavy, clinging to the spoon. It finds its way into coffee, desserts, military kits, kitchens in tropical climates, and childhood memories around the world. It is not fresh milk. It is milk dressed for travel, sweetened into endurance. A quirky tidbit enters with advertising. In the late 20th century, the milk moustache became one of the most recognizable marketing images in some countries. Celebrities, athletes, musicians, and actors posed with a white line above the lip, looking as though dairy had personally improved their bone structure and career prospects. The image was funny, oddly intimate, and extremely memorable. Humanity spent thousands of years learning to preserve milk, and then eventually decided the best way to sell it was to photograph famous people looking like they forgot to wipe their mouths. Marketing is mysterious, powerful, but mysterious. School milk programs also change the emotional meaning of the drink. You enter a classroom with wooden desks, chalk dust, damp coats, and the faint smell of pencil shavings. A crate of small bottles sits near the door, the glass cool and beaded with moisture. Children reach for them during a break. Some drink eagerly, some wrinkle their noses. One child secretly hopes someone else wants the warm bottle from the sunny side of the crate, because strategy begins early. Milk becomes part of public nutrition, national health campaigns, and the idea that strong children make strong societies. Governments promote dairy for many reasons: nutrition, farm support, public health, and national identity. Posters show smiling children, sturdy workers, shining barns, and cups filled to the brim. Milk is presented as pure, modern, wholesome, and almost patriotic in some places. The message is simple enough for a billboard drink: this: grow strong. Yet behind the simplicity is a complicated balance of science, farming interests, subsidies, school budgets, and cultural ideals about childhood. Dairy also becomes deeply global through cheese and butter trade. You walk through a cold warehouse stacked with wrapped blocks and wheels, each marked for shipment. The air smells of wax, cardboard, salt, and cold fat. Forklifts beep, pallets slide, labels carry names of faraway ports, cheddar crosses seas, butter moves in refrigerated containers. Infant formula factories use milk components from multiple regions. Ice cream brands dream internationally. Yogurt becomes a supermarket wall of choices so large that choosing one can feel like a minor moral test. Historians and food scholars continue to debate whether the global dairy boom was driven mostly by technology, state policy, corporate advertising, urban demand, changing nutrition science, or the political power of farm lobbies. The evidence points in several directions at once. Machines made scale possible. Governments made markets safer or more profitable. Advertisers made milk emotional. Consumers made habits. Farmers made supply. The machine grew because many hands kept feeding it. You step into a supermarket aisle, bright and cool, where milk appears almost weightless behind glass doors, whole, skim, low-fat, lactose-free, fortified, organic, flavoured, powdered, evaporated, condensed, cultured, probiotic, high-protein, ultra-filtered. The old pale liquid has multiplied into categories. The refrigerator hums steadily. The floor is smooth under your shoes. The air smells faintly of cardboard, chilled plastic, citrus cleaner, and cold dairy. You open a door, and a little fog curls around your wrist. This abundance can feel ordinary, but it is built on remarkable coordination. Animals are milked. Milk is cooled within hours. Tankers arrive. Samples are taken. Factories process. Labels are printed. Trucks distribute. Stores restock. Regulators inspect. Advertisers persuade. Shoppers compare dates, prices, fat levels, and claims. All of this happens so a carton can sit quietly beside cereal, tea, coffee, or a midnight glass. The global dairy machine is impressive, but not silent. It creates questions about small farmers, animal welfare, labour, land use, trade fairness, nutrition, and cultural pressure. In some communities, dairy is central and beloved. In others, many people cannot digest lactose easily, and milk promotion can feel imported or misplaced. The machine may be global, but human bodies and traditions are not identical. A carton can travel anywhere. Comfort does not always follow automatically. Night settles over a distribution yard. Trucks idle under yellow lights. Their refrigerated bodies hum softly, loaded with tomorrow's deliveries. The air smells of diesel, rain on pavement, cold metal, and faint milk from a spill near the loading bay. You place your hand against the side of a tanker and feel the vibration of machinery holding temperature steady. It is not romantic in the old pastoral sense. No moonlit meadow, no gentle pail beneath a patient cow. Yet there is a strange beauty in the coordination, in the way thousands of farms and factories and drivers and clerks create a daily river of nourishment. Milk has become world-sized. It moves through steel, paper, glass, plastic, powder, statistics, contracts, classrooms, advertisements, and kitchen fridges. It is measured in litres, tons, calories, margins, and memories. It can be a farmer's livelihood, a child's morning bottle, a soldier's ration, a dessert's sweetness, a school policy, a celebrity moustache, and a chilled carton glowing under fluorescent light. You listen to the trucks roll out into the dark, and the sound is steady, almost soothing, like a mechanical herd moving through the sleeping world. You stand in a bright kitchen where the refrigerator hums with a low, steady sound, and the world outside the window is already busy with traffic. Voices, delivery vans, and morning light. The floor is cool under your feet. A carton sits on the counter, beaded with tiny drops of moisture. Beside it waits another carton, not from a cow at all, but from oats, almonds, soybeans, peas, rice, or coconuts. The old white drink has company now. Quite a lot of company, actually. The fridge door has become a small diplomatic conference of beverages. You lift the dairy carton first. It feels smooth and cold in your hand, with a faint paper softness beneath the printed label. When you open it, the smell is mild, creamy, almost blank in its familiarity. Then you open the oat drink. It smells warmer, grainier, with a soft sweetness like porridge cooling in a bowl. Soy has its own beany depth. Almond is light and nutty. Coconut carries a tropical perfume, as if it arrived wearing sunglasses and refusing to discuss winter. Milk now lives in a world of choice: whole milk, skim milk, lactose-free milk, organic milk, raw milk, ultra-heat-treated milk, goat milk, sheep milk, camel milk, kefir, yogurt drinks, fortified formulas, and plant drinks all stand under the same cold supermarket lights. Some people choose dairy for tradition, protein, calcium, taste, baking, memory, or habit. Others avoid it because of lactose intolerance, allergies, ethics, environment, religion, preference, or because one bad childhood glass of warm milk was apparently enough for a lifetime. Food memories can be dramatic. They keep receipts. A mainstream historical fact shapes this modern scene. Much of the world's adult population has some degree of lactose intolerance, while lactase persistence is more common in populations with long histories of dairying. This means milk is not equally comfortable for everybody. For some people, a glass of milk is gentle and nourishing. For others, it is a polite invitation to digestive betrayal. Lactose-free milk offers one answer: using lactase enzyme to break down lactose while keeping much of the taste and nutrition of dairy. It is milk with a translation service. You pour some into a glass. The sound is soft and clean. A small rush followed by silence. The glass grows cold against your palm. Light passes through the liquid, making it glow at the edges. You taste it, and the flavour is simple, rounded, faintly sweet. Around this ordinary sip gathers a vast conversation: biology, ancestry, marketing, farming, animal care, public health, climate, and identity. The cup looks quiet. The debate around it is not. In another part of the world, you sit under a shaded roof while someone warms camel milk in a pot. The air smells of sand, smoke, cardamom, and animal wool. In a high mountain home, yak butter tea steams in a wooden bowl, salty and rich, warming cold fingers. In a South Asian kitchen, milk thickens slowly into sweets, perfumed with saffron and rose. In a Nordic dairy aisle, fermented cultured milk waits beside rye bread. In West Africa, herders sell fresh or soured milk along dusty roads. In Latin America, condensed milk turns desserts glossy and sweet. Milk is not one culture. It is many kitchens speaking in different accents. Yet the planet has entered the cup. Dairy farming can provide livelihoods and nutrition, but it can also require land, water, feed, energy, and careful manure management. Cows and other ruminants produce methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Large dairy systems raise questions about emissions, soil, biodiversity, water quality, and the future of farming. Small pastoral systems raise different questions, often tied to survival, culture, and land rights. The issue is not as simple as one carton good, one carton bad. History, once again, declines to fit neatly on a sticker. Plant-based drinks step into this uncertainty with confidence and some excellent packaging. They promise lower emissions in many cases, no animal milking, and new options for people who cannot or do not want to drink dairy. But they also vary widely in protein. Added sugars, fortification, farming impacts, processing methods, price, and taste. Almonds may raise water concerns in dry regions. Rice drinks can be lower in protein. Soy has strong nutrition but sometimes carries cultural baggage it did not personally request. Oat drinks foam nicely in coffee, which has given them influence far beyond what oats probably expected. Researchers continue to disagree over how societies should balance dairy nutrition, cultural tradition, animal welfare, climate impact, land use, and the rise of plant-based alternatives. The arguments shift by region. In one place, reducing dairy may lower environmental pressure. In another, milk animals may be central to rural survival, soil cycles, or pastoral identity. In wealthy cities, choice can look abundant. In fragile economies, choice may look more like what can keep children nourished through the week. You walk through a modern dairy farm designed with efficiency and monitoring in mind. The barn is airy, with fans turning overhead and sunlight falling in wide, pale stripes across clean bedding. Cows wear electronic collars. Sensors track movement, rumination, milk yield, and health signs. Robotic milking systems allow some cows to enter when they choose, lured by feed and routine. A machine cleans, attaches, milks, records, and releases. It is strangely calm, like a spa run by engineers. The atmosphere is a mix of old and new. You still smell hay, manure, warm hide, and sweet feed. You still hear hooves, breath, chewing, and the occasional offended moo. But there is also the beep of equipment, the soft hiss of hydraulics, the glow of screens, and the clean metallic scent of stainless steel. A farmer checks data on a tablet while standing beside an animal whose ancestors pulled carts and fed families without ever signing up for Bluetooth. Progress can be useful and faintly absurd at the same time. Animal welfare has become a major moral question. People ask how calves are raised, how cows are housed, how long they live, how often they are bred, what happens when production falls, and whether a system built on milk can truly respect the animals who make it. Some farms work toward better pasture access, lower stress handling, improved veterinary care, and smaller scale relationships between humans and herds. Others operate under pressure for maximum production at minimum cost. The label on a carton may feel reassuring, but behind it are leaves, economics, and choices that deserve more than sleepy slogans. A quirky modern tidbit is that scientists and food startups are now exploring milk proteins made without cows, using fermentation technology. Microorganisms can be guided to produce casein or whey proteins, which may then be used to make dairy-like foods. It sounds like a potion brewed by tiny invisible employees in a stainless steel castle. Some people see it as a future of cheese without herds. Others are skeptical of cost, scale, taste, and whether people will trust milk made by microbes in tanks. Considering that cheese itself has always depended on microbes, the microbes may be wondering why everyone is suddenly acting surprised. Memory remains stronger than any forecast. You may remember milk as a glass beside cookies, a splash in tea, a bowl of cereal at dawn, a school carton with a stubborn straw. Warm milk offered by a tired parent, or a dessert simmering in a grandmother's pot. For some, milk is comfort. For others, it is exclusion, stomach pain, or cultural pressure. The same drink can be kindness, commerce, irritation, nostalgia, or none of these. It depends on the body holding the cup. You stand again in the kitchen, listening to the refrigerator hum. Rain begins outside, tapping lightly against the window. The counter smells faintly of coffee, toast, and cold milk. Your fingers trace the rim of the glass. In that circle, you feel an unusual human story. People turned animal care into settlement, settlement into markets, markets into science, science into industry, and industry into questions large enough to fill the planet. All from a liquid meant first for young bodies at the beginning of life. The future of milk may not be one future, it may be many. Some people will keep dairy herds and improve them. Some will choose plants. Some will choose lactose-free cartons. Some will drink fermented mare's milk under open sky, camel milk in dry lands, goat milk in villages, or no milk at all. Some will buy cheese made by microbes, while someone else nearby insists that the old way tastes better, and then everyone will discuss it for far longer than planned. This is how food survives, by arguing, adapting, and staying useful. Now the room grows softer, the rain slows, the glass rests untouched, cool and pale in the dim light. You let the sounds become small, the hum of the fridge, the quiet settling of walls, the distant hiss of tyres on wet streets. Milk is no longer only a drink in this fading scene. It is a memory of hands, animals, fields, kitchens, hunger, care, and sleep. You breathe in gently. The air smells of rain and warm grain from the last crumbs of toast. Your shoulders loosen. Somewhere in the long human night, a herd settles, a child dreams, a pot cools beside the hearth, and a cup waits beside a bed. The story thins like mist over grass. Nothing more needs to be solved. The world is held for a moment in pale quiet, simple and soft, while the last light fades from the glass